The note was 5 words long, and it had destroyed him. I found it on the morning of my uncle's funeral, tucked beneath the door of his study in the house I had just inherited. A house I did not want. A title I had not expected. And there, on cream paper, in handwriting I would have known blind, 5 words. Don't look for me. E. That was 3 years ago. I'm standing in a milliner's shop in Bath now, and Eleanor Ashworth is 6 feet in front of me, holding a length of pale blue ribbon, as though nothing in the world has ever gone wrong. She has not seen me yet. My hands are shaking. I curl them into fists inside my gloves and try to remember how to breathe like a man who has not spent 1,000 nights reading that note until the creases wore through the paper. The ink has faded to grey now. I know because it is in my coat pocket. It is always in my coat pocket. She turns. The ribbon slips from her fingers. And I see the exact moment recognition hits her. The flash of shock, then something worse. Something that looks like fear. No, she whispers. Just that. Just no. As if she can undo my presence in this shop by refusing it. Mrs. Pemberton, says the shop girl, reaching for the fallen ribbon. Shall I wrap the blue, or did you prefer the... Mrs. Pemberton. The name lands like a blade between my ribs. I do not know that name. I have spent 3 years, 2 countries, and more money than I care to calculate, searching for Eleanor Ashworth. The name she was born with, the name she carried when she lived under my uncle's roof as his ward, the name I whispered against her hair the last night I saw her. She has been hiding behind a name I never thought to look for. You need to leave, she says. Her voice is low and urgent. Her eyes are scanning the shop girl, the window, the street beyond. She is calculating exits. I have seen that look before. She wore it every time my uncle entered a room. I will not, I say. You don't understand. Then make me understand. You owe me that much. Her chin comes up. There it is, that defiance I fell in love with, sharp and bright beneath 3 years of whatever hell she has been surviving without me. I owe you nothing, Your Grace, she says, and the title is a wall she builds between us with 2 words. She walks past me. I catch the scent of lavender and something colder. Rain, perhaps, or fear. And then she is through the door and into the grey Bath Street. And I am following her because I have been following her for 3 years, and I do not know how to stop. I should explain how we arrived here. How a duke's ward and his nephew became a story worth telling. How 5 words on a scrap of paper became the axis around which my entire life turned. My uncle, the 6th Duke of Ashworth, was a man the Ton admired and I despised. Handsome, charming in company, vicious in private. He took Eleanor in when she was 14, the orphan daughter of a clergyman who had once been his university friend. A generous act, society said, a noble act. I was 20 when I first came to Ravensmere, his estate in Hertfordshire, for a summer visit. Eleanor was 17. She was reading in the library when I walked in unannounced, and she startled so violently she knocked a vase from the side table. It shattered across the floor, and the colour drained from her face, as though the broken porcelain were a death sentence. It's nothing, I said, crouching to gather the pieces. I'll tell them I did it. She stared at me as though I had spoken in a foreign tongue. Why would you do that? Because it's a vase, not a child. No one should look that frightened over a vase. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in something she kept carefully sealed. She did not thank me. She simply said, "You are not like him," and left the room. I did not understand then what she meant. I understand now, and the understanding makes me want to tear Ravensmere down, stone by stone. My uncle controlled her entirely. Her meals, her movements, her correspondence, the clothes she wore, the books she was permitted to read, the people she was allowed to speak to. He did not strike her. He was too careful for that. He simply made her understand, through 1,000 small cruelties, that she existed at his pleasure and could be discarded at his whim. A ward with no family, no fortune, and no recourse. She was trapped, and he enjoyed the trapping. I returned to Ravensmere every season after that first visit. I told myself it was duty. My uncle was my only living relative, and I was his heir. But I knew, even then, that I came back for the way Eleanor's shoulders dropped half an inch when I walked into a room, as though some part of her exhaled. We were never alone together. My uncle saw to that. But we found edges, moments at the border of propriety where something real passed between us. A book she had mentioned wanting, left on the library table where she would find it. A glance across the dinner table when my uncle said something cutting, and her eyes met mine, and I saw her think, "You heard it too." A walk in the garden with my aunt's elderly companion, dozing on a bench 30 feet away, and Eleanor saying quietly, "You should not be kind to me. He notices." "Let him notice," I said. "You don't know what he does when you leave." That sentence lived inside my chest like a splinter for months. The last time I saw her was the winter before my uncle died. There was a house party at Ravensmere, a cold, glittering affair filled with people who admired my uncle's wine cellar and ignored the way his ward flinched when he raised his voice. On the final evening, I found Eleanor alone in the conservatory. The glass was fogged with cold, and she was standing with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. "Eleanor," I said, her Christian name. I had never used it before. It came out low and rough and desperate, and she turned to me with an expression I will never forget, half longing, half grief. "You cannot," she said. "Please, you cannot say my name like that and then leave again." "Then I won't leave." "You will. You always do. And I will be here, and he will be—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. I watched her rebuild every wall I had just heard crack. "What does he do?" I asked. "Eleanor, what does he do when I leave?" She shook her head. "Go back to the party, Mr. Hale." Mr. Hale. My surname like a locked door. I reached for her hand. She let me take it. Her fingers were ice cold and trembling, and I held them between both of mine, as though I could warm 3 years of winter out of her bones. "I am going to get you out of here," I said. She looked at me with eyes that wanted to believe and could not afford to. "Don't make promises you cannot keep. I have never broken a promise to you. You have never made one." She was right. So I made one then, standing in a frozen conservatory, with her hand in mine, and both our reputations balanced on the edge of a knife. "I will come back for you, before the season. I will find a way." She pulled her hand free, gently but completely. "Good night, Mr. Hale." 3 weeks later, my uncle was dead. An apoplexy, the physician said. Swift and final. I became the 7th Duke of Ashworth overnight, and the first thing I did, the very first thing, before the solicitors, before the funeral, before the black crape was hung, was ride to Ravensmere to find her. She was already gone. The servant said she had left in the night. No trunk, no forwarding address, only the note. "Don't look for me. E." followed her through the streets of Bath for 2 blocks before she turned sharply into the entrance of the pump room and stopped, breathing hard, clearly betting that I would not make a scene in a public assembly room. She did not know me as well as she thought. "Mrs. Pemberton," I said, loud enough to carry. A false name deserved a public greeting. "What a pleasure. I had no idea you were in Bath." She turned. Her expression was ice, but her pulse was visible at her throat, beating fast. "Your Grace, how unexpected." A woman nearby glanced up at the title. "Good. Let them look." "You must allow me to call on you," I said. "Proper form. The kind of thing a duke says to an acquaintance he has encountered by chance. The kind of thing that is almost impossible to refuse without drawing attention. I am not receiving visitors at present." "Tomorrow at 3 then. Where are you staying?" "Your Grace." "I can ask the Master of Ceremonies. He keeps a register of all visitors to Bath. Or you can tell me yourself and spare us both the theatre." Her jaw tightened. I watched her calculate. The cost of refusal, the cost of compliance, the eyes already watching us. She was always calculating. My uncle had taught her that survival was arithmetic. "Number 7, Camden Place," she said. "But I will not be home." "Then I will wait." She was not home at 3 o'clock the following day. I waited in a small, cold parlour with hired furniture and a single painting on the wall. A watercolour of a garden that looked nothing like any garden I had seen. But on the mantelpiece, half hidden behind a candlestick, was a book I recognised. Sense and Sensibility. The same edition I had left on the library table at Ravensmere 5 years ago. The spine was cracked from rereading. She had kept it. Through 3 years and a false name, and whatever desperate flight had brought her here, she had kept the book. I was still holding it when she came in at 4:30, rain-damp and furious. "Put that down." "You kept it." "It is a book. I kept a book. It signifies nothing." "It signifies that you thought of me." I thought of many things during my time at Ravensmere, not all of them fondly. I set the book down carefully, exactly where I had found it. "Why did you leave?" "I left because I chose to." "You left because you were afraid. You left a note designed to end a conversation, not begin one. And you hid behind a false name so I could not. So you could not find me. Yes. That was the point. The note was clear. The note was 5 words long. It explained nothing. It did not need to explain. It needed to be obeyed. "I am not your uncle, Eleanor. I do not obey commands and I do not issue them." She went very still. I had used her name. Her real name, in this rented parlour with its thin walls and hired furniture, and it hung between us like something living. "You should not have come," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. What remained was something rawer, exhaustion perhaps, or the effort of maintaining fury when the person you are furious with is the only person in 3 years who has called you by your name. And yet I am here. Why? The word broke slightly. "Because you wrote, 'Don't look for me.' And I could not think of a single good reason you would write that, unless you believed I would be better off without you. And you were wrong." She turned away from me, faced the window with its view of a grey street, and said nothing for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "Your uncle told me something the day before he died. He called me into his study and told me that if you and I were ever found to have that if there was ever any suggestion of an attachment between us, He would reveal that my mother had not been married to my father when I was born, that I was illegitimate, that every introduction, every connection, every shred of respectability I possessed was built on a lie he had maintained for years. The room tilted. Is it true? I don't know. I have never been able to confirm it. But it doesn't matter if it's true. He had letters, forged or genuine, I cannot say. And he told me he had left them with his solicitor, to be opened in the event of his death if I was still in the household. If I left before he died, they would be destroyed. So you left? I left. I left so those letters would be destroyed. I left so your name would not be dragged through scandal. I left so you could inherit cleanly and marry well and never have to answer questions about your uncle's ward and whether she was. She stopped. Her shoulders were rigid. I left to protect you. I did not ask to be protected. You did not need to ask. I could see what it would cost you. A duke attached to a woman of no family, no fortune, and possibly no legitimate birth. I would have been happy. The word cracked something open in the room. She pressed her hand flat against the window pane, as though she needed the cold to keep her upright. You cannot know that, she whispered. I have spent 3 years knowing nothing else. I did not press her further that day. I left Camden Place with the rain soaking through my coat and the taste of unfinished sentences in my mouth. And I did what I should have done 3 years ago. I went to find the truth. My uncle's solicitor was a man named Crewe, precise, papery, loyal to the 6th Duke's memory. I arrived at his offices in Milsom Street the following morning and informed him, with the full weight of my title behind every syllable, that I required access to all documents pertaining to Miss Eleanor Ashworth's wardship. He resisted. I persisted. I may have implied that a failure to cooperate would result in a comprehensive audit of his firm's handling of the Ashworth estate. An audit I was entirely prepared to commission. The letters were in a locked drawer, 3 of them, yellowed with age, purporting to be correspondence between Eleanor's mother and a man who was not the Reverend Ashworth. I read them twice. Then I showed them to a friend from university, now a barrister with an interest in forgery cases, who examined them for an hour and pronounced them clumsy fakes. The paper was wrong for the dates. The handwriting, while close, showed inconsistencies that suggested a skilled but imperfect imitation. My uncle had built a cage out of lies and locked Eleanor inside it. Even from the grave, he had kept her running. I burned the letters that evening, watched the paper curl and blacken in the grate of my rented rooms, and felt something between rage and relief. Then I wrote Eleanor a note of my own. The letters were forged. You are legitimate. You are free. Ah. I sent it to Camden Place and waited. She came to me. That alone told me everything I needed to know. That Eleanor Ashworth, who had spent 3 years hiding, who had changed her name and her city and her life to avoid being found, walked through the streets of Bath to my door because she could not wait for morning. The landlady let her in with raised eyebrows and a muttered comment about propriety. I did not care. Eleanor stood in the doorway of my sitting room with my note in her hand and tears on her face. And I understood that I was looking at a woman who had just been released from a prison she had carried inside her own body for a decade. How did you know they were forged? She asked. I had them examined by someone who knows. Eleanor, he lied about all of it. Your parents were married. Your birth was legitimate. There is nothing for anyone to find. She pressed the note against her chest. You burned them to ash. A sound came out of her that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. Something between the two, something that had been locked away for years and could not decide what shape to take now that it was finally free. I thought... She stopped, started again. I thought if I disappeared, you would forget, that it would be easier, that you would find some earl's daughter with impeccable lineage and a dowry the size of Hertfordshire, and you would be miserable. I would have been miserable, and I would have deserved it for letting you go. I crossed the room, stopped 2 feet from her because I was not my uncle, and I would not take what was not offered. I have carried your note for 3 years. It is in my pocket now. It has been in my pocket every single day since you left, and I need you to understand something. What? You wrote, "Don't look for me." You meant it as an ending. I read it as a compass heading. You were out there somewhere, and as long as I was breathing, I was going to find you. She looked up at me, and I watched the last wall fall. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like ice thinning in spring. Slowly, and then all at once, and then it was gone, and she was just Eleanor, standing in front of me with red eyes and trembling hands and no more armor. Roswell, she said. My Christian name. The first time. It hit me like a thunderclap in a clear sky, and I could not speak for a moment, because the sound of my name in her voice was the thing I had been searching for across 3 years and 2 countries, and I had not known it until this second. I reached for her hand. She gave it to me. Warm this time, not the frozen fingers in the conservatory, not the hand pulled away. She stepped closer, and I could feel the heat of her through the damp fabric of her cloak, and the distance between us was nothing now, inches, the width of a breath. I am going to kiss you, I said, unless you tell me not to. I have been telling you what not to do for 3 years, she said. You have never once listened. I kissed her, and it was not gentle. It was the release of 3 years of searching and waiting and refusing to let go. And she kissed me back with the same desperate intensity, her hands fisting in my coat, pulling me closer, as though she was afraid I might disappear the way she had. When we broke apart, she was shaking. So was I. What happens now? She asked. Now I marry you. Society will talk. Society has been boring me for years. Let them talk about something interesting for once. Your Grace, Roswell. If you call me Your Grace after that kiss, I will be genuinely offended. She almost smiled. Almost. It was the most beautiful thing I had seen in 3 years. Society did talk, spectacularly. The 7th Duke of Ashworth, marrying his late uncle's ward, a woman of no fortune, no family connections, no dowry, who had been living under a false name in Bath. The gossip sheets were savage. Lady Whitmore, the undisputed queen of Mayfair's drawing rooms, declared it the most reckless match since the century began, and predicted social ruin within the year. We were married at St. Swithin's in Bath on a Tuesday morning in November, with rain streaking the windows and exactly 4 people in attendance. My barrister friend as witness, Eleanor's landlady who wept throughout, the vicar, and the vicar's deeply confused dog, who wandered in through an open door and sat in the aisle as though he had received a personal invitation. Eleanor wore grey silk, not white because she said white was for women who had not survived what she had survived, and she wanted to stand at the altar in the colour of storm clouds and mean it. I loved her so fiercely in that moment I thought my chest would crack open. But our quiet ceremony did not quiet the whispers. My uncle's cousin, a man named Gerald Hale, who had expected to inherit a portion of the estate and found himself shut out by my uncle's will, saw our marriage as opportunity. Within a fortnight, he was circulating rumors. Eleanor was a fortune hunter. Eleanor had been my uncle's mistress. Eleanor had been the reason for my uncle's death. Each rumor was more poisonous than the last, and Gerald was clever. He never said any of it directly. He simply ensured it was said, in the right drawing rooms, by the right people, until the whispers formed a chorus. Eleanor bore it with the same rigid composure she had learned at Ravensmere. She did not cry. She did not rage. She simply went very quiet and very still, and I recognized the posture. She was bracing for impact, waiting for the blow she had always known was coming. "I will handle Gerald," I told her. "How?" "Leave that to me." The last man who told me to leave something to him kept me captive for 6 years. The words landed like a slap. She was right. She was absolutely right. And I was an idiot. "Then we will handle Gerald together," I said. "Tell me what you want to do." What she wanted to do, it turned out, was magnificent. The occasion was Lady Whitmore's winter ball, the most watched social event of the Bath season. Gerald would be there. So would every person who had whispered about us for the past month. Eleanor dressed in deep blue velvet, a duchess's gown, unmistakable in its message. She wore the Ashworth sapphires, which I had retrieved from the vault at Ravensmere specifically for this purpose. When we entered the ballroom, the conversation faltered and then surged, and I could feel every eye in the room adjusting to the reality of us. Gerald found us within 20 minutes. He was smooth, solicitous, dripping with false warmth. "Cousin, and the new Duchess, how lovely to see you both looking so well." "Mr. Hale," Eleanor said. Her voice carried beautifully, pitched to reach the surrounding guests without appearing to try. "How kind, and how fortunate that we should meet tonight, because I have been meaning to thank you." Gerald blinked. "Thank me?" "For the letters," she smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had learned to survive a decade under the 6th Duke of Ashworth, and it was terrifying. "The ones you helped your cousin forge, about my mother." The colour drained from Gerald's face. Around us, conversations died like candle flames in a draught. I have no idea what you..." "My husband's barrister examined them. The paper was manufactured in 1808, 3 years after the dates on the letters. An interesting detail, don't you think? And the handwriting analysis revealed a right-hand tremor consistent with your cousin's later years. Not the hand of a woman writing in 1785. She paused. Let the silence do its work. I wonder what the magistrate would make of a systematic campaign of forgery and extortion against a ward with no legal protector. Gerald's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked like a fish hauled onto a riverbank. "You have been telling Bath that I am a fortune hunter," Eleanor continued, still smiling, still carrying that voice like a weapon wrapped in silk. "Allow me to correct the record. I am the daughter of the Reverend James Ashworth and his lawful wife, Catherine. I was placed in the care of the 6th Duke, who used forged documents to control me for 6 years. I fled with nothing. I lived under a false name. And I married the 7th Duke not for his fortune, but because he was the only person in 10 years who asked me what I wanted, instead of telling me what I was." She turned to me, and her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with something fiercer, something that looked like freedom finally worn on the outside. "And now, Mr. Hale," she said, turning back to Gerald, I believe you have a choice. You may leave Bath quietly, and we will consider the matter closed. Or you may stay and discover exactly how much authority a duke and duchess can bring to bear when motivated. I assure you, we are very motivated. Gerald left Bath the following morning. Lady Whitmore declared Eleanor the most formidable duchess in recent memory and invited us to tea. That was 4 months ago. I am writing this from the library at Ravensmere, the same library where Eleanor knocked a vase off a side table, and I told her I would take the blame. The vase has been replaced. The room has not changed much, but it feels different now. Lighter, as though the house itself has exhaled. Eleanor is in the garden. I can see her through the window. She is directing the gardener with the same quiet authority she used to dismantle Gerald Hale in a crowded ballroom. She is replanting the beds my uncle let go to ruin. She says she wants to see what grows when someone tends to things, instead of controlling them. On the mantelpiece in our bedroom, in a small glass frame, is the note. 5 words on cream paper, creased almost to tearing. Don't look for me. E. I keep it there not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of distance. Proof of how far we have come from the 2 people we were. Her, convinced that disappearing was the only way to protect someone she loved. Me, too slow to see what was happening under my uncle's roof until it was almost too late. She asked me once why I never stopped looking. I told her the truth, which was simple and insufficient, and the only answer I had. Because you asked me not to. And you have never, in the entire time I have known you, asked for anything you did not desperately need the opposite of. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You are the most infuriating man I have ever met. And yet you married me. And yet I married you." She smiled, not the sharp, defensive smile she wore in ballrooms, but the real one. The one I had seen exactly once before, in a frozen conservatory, before everything fell apart. The one that made me understand, at 20 years old, that I was going to love this woman for the rest of my life, whether it was wise or convenient or socially acceptable, and that I did not care about any of those things, and never would. The garden is coming back. The roses are stubborn, Eleanor says, but not hopeless. She talks about them as though they are old friends being coaxed out of hiding. I think she is talking about herself. I think she knows I know. The note stays on the mantelpiece. The book stays on the shelf. And Eleanor stays. That is enough. That is everything.